evening, everybody. Welcome to the planning meeting on the 24th of November. Can I just quickly do some housekeeping, please? Can I make sure that everybody's got their agendas, and we're not going to be too distracted with people's mobile phones going off, I hope. I will do apologies for absence, if that's okay. Is that with Ellie?
Yeah, no apologies have been received.
Thank you, Ellie. Anybody have any declarations of interest, please?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Michael.
Item 9, I've been lobbied. Item 12, I believe, has been withdrawn, but for the sake of completeness, the applicant is a district councillor. And that's it. Thank you, Madam Chairman. It is a personal. I've been lobbied. Personal, non-prejudicial, non-pecuniary.
Thank you. Anybody else need to declare an interest?
Yeah.
Snowy.
Madam Chairman, item 9. I've been lobbied on agenda item 9, personal, non-pecuniary, non-whatever.
Right. Thank you. Anybody else? Jim, Councillor Bailey.
Same, Chairman. I've been lobbied on item 9.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. I'm going to declare that I've also been lobbied on item 9, which I think is the Sproxton one, and item 10 I've been lobbied as well. They are personal, non-prejudicial, non-pecuniary, and I think that's... has anybody else joined us?
Yeah. Hi, guys. Sorry I'm late. Just finished work.
Thanks, Councillor Mason. Okay. Can we go to the minutes from the previous meetings? We've actually got 2 lots of minutes. Glenn, can I ask you, can we take them both together? If there's nothing contentious on the minutes, one of them is the minutes from the previous meeting of the council, and the other one is the emergency extraordinary meeting where we had to deal with the site visit issues. Was everybody happy with the minutes?
I move them, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. I'll second. Sorry, Eric.
Chairman, yeah, sorry, I got a bit lost on that one. John Raper sub for me on the last one.
So you need to abstain, Eric.
I'm going to abstain, yeah.
That's fine, okay. But everybody else is fine with them unless you indicate otherwise.
I'll abstain from the emergency meeting. I wasn't able to attend.
Thank you, Steve. So, Eric, were you the emergency meeting or the meeting previous?
I think it was the emergency one.
Okay.
No, sorry.
No, Councillor Raper was at the October meeting.
Yeah,
right,
the October meeting.
So, Eric, you can abstain for the October meeting minutes.
Yeah.
And Councillor Mason can abstain for the emergency meeting minutes.
Yeah.
Is everybody else happy with the minutes? Fine. Can we accept those as a true record? I'll sign them at some other point. Right, okay. Before we move on to the agenda, I've got no urgent business, but before we move on to the agenda itself, ladies and gentlemen, can I just say a few words? The last meeting was a tricky meeting with those members who didn't always agree with the policy. Let me first state that the planning committee is an apolitical committee. We do not do politics in planning. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have planning policy which we adopted as a council, and that policy is what we're working to. It's what our officers work to. Whilst we may not always like some of those policies, they are the adopted policies of the council, and therefore actually taking officers to task over the adopted policies is not on. So let's just keep the meeting to the principles of planning and not actually stray outside of them. We have a policy, we have the MPPF. Those are what we use to make our planning decisions on. If you want to challenge those, the right place to do it is at the review, which is the local plan working party, or the Policy and Resources Committee. It is not to challenge officers in the planning meeting. Okay, thank you for that. I'm sorry I've had to say it, but it does need, I just felt it needed clarifying. Right, so if we can move on to the schedule of items and move on to item 7, which is an application 20/00598 Major Full, and it's land and fields OS 6882 and 8386 York Lane, Flaxton, and I think it's Ellie? No, it's Neve. Neve, this is your one, isn't it,
Yep.
Neve? Thank you.
That is, thank you. Just to check, is the perfect? I see it coming up. Thank you, Ellie. And if possible, would it be okay to go to the first map? That's the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so this application site relates to an agricultural field which is positioned at the corner of Cross Lane and York Lane, which is just located to the west of the village of Flaxton. If we could just skip to the next map, please.
Can I just say there's nothing coming up on the screens?
I'm getting them on mine.
Yeah, I can see it all right.
I'm not getting it.
No,
I have it in front of me.
Oh. Right. I'm not getting it either. Neve, do you want to carry on? Because we did this earlier in the afternoon, so it might sort itself out.
Yeah, that's fine. So yeah, as I noted, the application site is a field that's positioned at the corner of Cross Lane and Flaxton and where it meets York Lane and Flaxton, and it's just to the west of the village itself. It's an agricultural field. It falls outside the development limits, and it's part of an agricultural holding operated by the applicant at 7 acres, which is just to the east of the site. The site is relatively flat and it's very well landscaped from public views as a result of hedging along the western and southern boundaries. And if we could just flip to the next slide for those who can see it, please. So that is looking along the western boundary of the site. And then if we could just go to the next one, please. And that is the southern boundary of the site. So you can just see the junction of the road there. Now, there are also, just to note, no public rights of way in proximity to the site. So as you'll be aware, this application seeks approval for the change of use of this agricultural land to a dog walking field. The proposal would include the erection of 2 internally fenced off areas within the site, broadly rectangular in form, to form 2 separate dedicated dog walking areas. Now, this is before members because under the scheme of delegation, the size of the application site constitutes a major application, and that is the reason why it must be considered by members. The 2 dog walking areas would each be fenced with 1.8 metre high deer fencing that would be supplemented by a finer rabbit fencing towards the bottom, and 1 information board would be positioned within each of the 2 dog walking areas. And it's shown on the proposed plans that the field boundaries to the north, to the east, to the west and to the south won't be changing. It would only be along the eastern boundary of the site where there would be some additional fencing proposed. And if we could move across to the 4th photograph, Ellie, please. Just the next one, please. So this is the access to the site from Cross Lane and Flaxton. And this is actually land that is common land, which is under the ownership of the public trustee. And as you can see, it's been finished with loose gravel material. So if we could just go on to the next photograph, please, Ali. So this photograph is taken from within the northwestern corner of the site, looking towards the southeast. And from there, you can appreciate the boundary treatment along the southern edge of the site and partly along the western edge of the site. If we could just go to the next photograph, please. This photograph is taken from the southwest corner of the site, and it's looking over towards the east, over land that will remain farmland in the ownership of the applicant. And it's along the eastern boundary of the site that the new fencing will be erected. And if we could just go to the next slide, please. And this photograph was taken from the southwestern corner of the site, looking towards the northwest. Thank you. So in terms of the principle of the development, in this supporting statement, it was noted that the applicants are seeking ways to diversify their agricultural business and to maintain its financial viability. And the statement continued to note that there is demand for this type of safe, controlled space, and that dog ownership has increased in recent years. It's considered that this would provide a safe facility for dog owners to walk and to train their dogs off the lead. In terms of the principle of the development, there's fairly limited operational development involved, and also it would be reversible. So it's not considered to constitute the permanent loss of agricultural land. And it is also concluded in terms of principle that the provision of this type of facility would help to diversify their existing agricultural business, and in that sense it does align with local policy. In terms of the impact on the character of the site, as I did note, the operational development is relatively limited. The 1.8 metre high fencing internally within the site wouldn't actually require planning permission if it were for agricultural purposes. As detailed in the report, there are specific conditions that will ensure the well-established landscaping to the west and south is maintained at a minimum height of 2.5 metres, unless otherwise agreed with the local planning authority. And that will ensure that it would have limited impact on the street scene. There's also a condition that no other permanent structures or hard standing can be erected without planning permission. So, subject to those conditions, it's considered it wouldn't have a detrimental effect on the character of the locality. In terms of neighbouring amenity, the proposed site is located at a significant distance from neighbouring residential properties. The nearest residential property would be approximately 106 metres to the north of the site. Various conditions have been recommended to ensure that it doesn't affect neighbouring properties even if they are at a distance, and these include an hours of operation condition to ensure that it is operated only between 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. There will be a pre-booking system controlled by planning condition. There is a maximum number of dogs allowed within the site at any one time, and there's also a condition to ensure that there's no lighting. The agent has highlighted within their supporting statement the waste management measures, which include provision of dedicated bins and a weekly collection from a waste management company. There'll be regular checks by the site owner, and any users failing to collect waste will be banned from the site. So in regard to those conditions, it's not considered that there would be any kind of enhanced or material level of disturbance that would unduly affect residents. Then moving on to drainage and flood risk, as noted in the report, a very small section of the site is located in flood zone 3, but the majority of the site, including the access and the parking areas, within flood zone 1. In terms of flood risk, the EA confirmed they had no objection to the development. And as you'll see, the Foss Internal Drainage Board were also consulted. They had initially objected because they do require unrestricted access to Flaxton Dyke, which just runs along the north of the site. And I think if we have the presentation, my last photograph shows that, but it is quite a minor waterway. But negotiations were undertaken, and the majority of the proposed grass crate parking provision, which will provide kind of surfacing for vehicles coming onto the site directly, it will be moved away from its originally proposed positioning to allow the IDB to have access in emergency situations. The agent confirmed that if the IDB did have to travel over that, it would be able to withstand their heavy vehicles, and the applicant will take on any liability for any kind of damaged surfacing if that does arise in the future. So the IDB, subject to condition, had confirmed no objection to revise the details. Then finally, on to the access and highway safety. As detailed in the report, North Yorkshire Highways had provided initial comments that they had that included various conditions. One of these conditions was that there was to be no loose surfacing within 2 meters of the highway. That was written whenever it was believed that it was perhaps highway's verge. It's since been clarified that this area is common land, and the small area, as you can see in the photograph, has been treated with loose material. The agent had confirmed within the supporting information that as it was common land, they had applied to the public trustee for the composition of the existing access. The public trustee had confirmed that because of the loose material, they didn't need a formal application to them. At that point, we thought it was pragmatic to check with North Yorkshire Highways that they were content with that. And they reconfirmed in an updated consultation response that because it was common land, it was not within their kind of jurisdiction to demand that it was anything other than what was originally put down. Sorry, excuse me. However, Highways have recommended a different condition in light of it, and that will include curbing within the public highway itself. So because that's not on common land, it won't require any further application to the public trustee, and the agent has confirmed that he's content with that in principle. So that will be a pre-commencement condition before the use is brought into use. The neighbour and parish representations were fully discussed within the report, and on the basis of the revised plans and recommended conditions, it's considered that the original concerns were fully addressed. And for that reason, we believe that this application can be undertaken in accordance with local policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Niamh. We do have a speaker this evening, so I'm going to ask the speaker to come forward in a moment. Speakers have 3 minutes to state the cases in support of their application. So if I could ask Mr. Ayres Sumner to come forward and represent the applicant, I believe. Mr. Sumner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicants and in support of the application for the dog walking field. There are several reasons which give rise to the application. The applicants are seeking to diversify their agricultural business and income stream outside to ensure the sustainability of business.
Chair, I can't hear properly. I'm just wondering if there's something wrong with the machine, or is it just me?
No, I think we are having connection problems, Councillor Andrews. Mr. Sumner, would you like to start again, because we're having connection problems with you and you're fading in and out.
Can you hear me okay now?
That's a little better.
Chairman, can we make sure all members are on mute, because I think one or two aren't. Thank you, Councillor Potter.
Should I start?
Yeah, do start again.
Now, okay?
Sorry. Yes, thank you.
That's okay. There are several reasons which give rise to the application. The applicants are seeking to diversify their agricultural business and seeking an income stream from outside of farming to ensure the sustainability and financial viability of their business, and also to cater for growing demand for enclosed dog walking facilities. The opportunity is supported by the location and immediate proximity to York and surrounding villages such as Strensall and Haxby. It does not need explaining further, but dog ownership has increased significantly in recent years, and certainly since the existence of COVID-19. The applicants have carried out their own market research and search of press releases, which has confirmed the demand for provision of a safe, controlled place to walk and train dogs. There is an increasing trend of livestock being worried and harmed by unruly and out of control dogs, this often resulting in the death of livestock. The applicant's proposal will create a safe place for these dogs to be both trained and exercised, whilst taking the opportunity to try and educate the public and dog owners of the responsibility they should have while exercising their dog in rural areas and the country. So the applicants have proposed to install an information board in each of the designated dog walking compounds. I must stress that these boards will not be used for advertising and monetary gain, but for the display of material to educate dog owners and users of the countryside. The applicants have been the subject of dealing with dog owners and out of control dogs, and feel very passionately that this is not always the dog owner or the dog's direct fault, but that every opportunity should be taken to educate the persons of their actions, which might help resolve wider issues being experienced. The site is both accessible and discreet, and the development does not provide significant harm to the appearance of the area and surrounding landscape, but will provide a facility for use by the public, which will also help support an existing rural business and young generation farmers to continue to exist in a rural setting. Inquiries have been made with regard to the common land where the access is located. Formal inquiries along the correct procedures have been made by the Planning Inspectorate, which has confirmed that no further consents are required with regard to the use or construction of the access. The access has previously created a point of consideration and discussion with the local common right holders and Greengate Committee, but these issues have been resolved. I do not wish to recite the material which has already been submitted, which I'm sure you've all had a chance to consider, but we believe the application should be supported, as socially it supports a significant number of local planning and national planning objectives and community issues. I hope this gives you an insight into the development and the reasons behind it, and I hope that you can support the application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So you just did that in time nicely. Thank you. Right, I will open it up for questions. Do members have any questions? Do you want me to work down the list, or do you want to put your hands up? Right, I'll work down the list then, since I'm right. Councillor Andrews.
No questions, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey, you shook your head.
No questions, no.
Councillor Cleary.
No questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hope.
No questions have been answered, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
No questions.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
No questions, they were answered in the report, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thackeray.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Windress.
No questions, Madam Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Right, then I'll move it into the debate because I have no questions, and I'll come to the local member first, which is Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Chairman. What an encouraging sign that it wasn't mentioned in the build-up, but the information signs that are going to be put up. I think educating the public to what goes on, I think it's a good thing, and I think they need encouragement as the family. They're a hard-working family throughout the land. They've got big landowners, and I think this dog walking job, I think it'll be a good thing. And they're going to keep an eye on it and keep it on the, sort of keep it right all the way through. And I'm sure, knowing the family like I do, they will look after it and it will be right. So I have no hesitation in recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. Councillor Andrews.
I'll just second the proposal, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey. Okay, we're not quite at the vote yet, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My colleague, Councillor Andrews, beat me to seconding this application. In some respects, I wonder if I should have declared an interest, not in so much the application, but in the subject of trespass or incursion by people who shouldn't have been on my property over the lockdown, and the loss on 2 occasions of young sheep to what dog experts who have seen photographs suggest are large dogs. I think the application and its type of application, I think we've supported, with one exception where the site was in the wrong place, this kind of application we're generally supportive of, and I think this is a particularly fine example of what should be, in all respects, socially, economically, and whatever the third item was, something we should support. So I'm very happy to support this application.
Thank you very much. From the chair, I'm very happy to support the application. Much in favour of dog walking facilities that are safe, secure, without worrying about whether your dog can escape onto the main road or into fields where there might be animals. I think it's really important, and it's in the right kind of place. I just hope there's no disturbance, but we have 2 of these establishments just up the road from us outside the village, and they work very well, so I've got no worries to support. Councillor Mason.
To really just echo what yourself and Michael have said, I wonder if I should declare an interest as a dog owner because I like dogs.
Right, not necessarily. Councillor Mackenzie.
Well, I haven't finished yet. I do understand the need for this being. We do deal with dogs, and in particular, walking dogs. We're blessed here, but I know a lot of villages aren't blessed with these sort of facilities. The one in Swinton, I believe, works quite well, so I have no objection to this at all.
Yeah, apologies, Councillor Mason. You broke up and I thought you'd finished. Apologies for that. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's no doubt that dog ownership has increased since the pandemic. I think people want them to have a good excuse for exercise, and I will be happy to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Nothing much to add, really. I do think this is a useful facility for responsible dog owners who particularly wanting to train the dogs and have somewhere safe to do so. It's just, I would add the comment that unfortunately irresponsible dog owners won't be using this sort of facility anyway. But yeah, I can certainly support this. Thank you.
That's a fair comment, Councillor Potter. Thank you for that. Councillor Thackeray.
No, I don't have any comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Windrest.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I will be supporting this. It's a good distance away from the nearest dwelling, and if they're in the right place, I have no problem with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, members, it's been moved and seconded for approval. Can we please go to the vote? And I'll go down the list in alphabetical order as usual. Councillor Andrews.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
4.
Thank you. I'm 4. Councillor Goodrick 4. Councillor Hope.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
4.
Councillor Mackenzie.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thackeray.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Windress.
4.
Thank you. That's unanimous. It's 10 votes for. Thank you. It is approved. Right. Can we please move on to item 8 on the agenda, which you'll find at page 38. Application number 20/00703/ Major Full. This is use of land for the siting of 47 static holiday accommodation units for year-round use and improved road access at the Snooty Fox, Scarborough Road, East Heslington. And I think Alan Goforth, our officer Alan, is going to take this. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this item is reported to Planning Committee as a major development application, as the application site exceeds 1 hectare in area. There are no objections to the application. In terms of updates, within the late pages circulated at the end of last week, it did include a response from Highways England, which reiterated their earlier response, which was that of no concerns, subject to a condition relating to abnormal loads. So the application relates to a holiday site, which at the moment is permitted for 55 touring caravans, which can be sited all year round. The principle of the use of the land for holiday accommodation has therefore been established over the years. The site is within the open countryside with access off the A64. The site is also within the Wolds area of high landscape value and has a bunded perimeter topped with tree planting of mixed condition. The amendments to the application reduced the number of static units down from 65, and the amount of tarmac hard standing was also reduced, which addressed the officer concerns relating to the high density layout and regimented form. Within the accompanying plans for this item, within the agenda, there is the initial site layout plan for members to view, which shows the proposed layout when it was the 65 units. In addition, the applicant has provided further information in relation to the landscape planting proposals, which have satisfied the tree and landscape officer and will be secured by planning condition. Highways England have no objections, subject to a condition to manage the abnormal loads during the construction phase, and there are no objections from the parish council, and the county archaeologist has requested a scheme of archaeological mitigation to be secured by condition. The standard conditions in relation to the occupancy of the holiday accommodation will also be imposed. In conclusion, the proposal represents an appropriate development of an established caravan park, which would improve the viability of the business, retain employment at the site, and attract visitors to the district all year round. Taking account of the location of the development in terms of proximity to sensitive receptors, the public highway, and the effectiveness of screen planting, it is considered that the static units and the extended operating season can be accommodated without giving rise to an unacceptable visual intrusion or an adverse impact on the character of the locally valued landscape. It is therefore recommended that the planning permission is granted, subject to the 11 conditions as listed in the planning report. There's also a series of slides which accompany this item, which I think, Ellie, if you could just kindly run through those or begin to run through those. The first one here is obviously the aerial photo of the existing site. You can see its relationship with the A64, and it's a relatively isolated site, and you can see also the existing planting, the bunding along the perimeter of the site on the western, northern and eastern sides, and also the area of hard standing on the southern side, which links to the A64. The site is within the open countryside and area of high landscape value. Can you just move on to the next slide, please, Ellie? This is facing north, just showing the area of hard standing to the front of the application site. This is facing towards the Snooty Fox itself, the building, the pub. And the next slide, please. And this slide just showing the existing visibility displays with the A64 in both directions. The next slide shows the other visibility, and there's no issues from either the local highway officer or Highways England in this respect. On that photo, you can also see the existing commercial buildings which stand to the southeast of the application site. Next slide, please. And this is just facing back, facing south, just to show the land, how it rises up towards the Wolds. And it's along references made in the report to the Wolds Way footpath, which is along this hillside, and there are views of the site available between the areas of woodland albeit at a distance of about 1.5 kilometres. So moving on to the next slide, we're into the site itself. As you'd expect, the series of 55 caravans are allowed to be on site, and they're allowed to be on site all year round, which allows for storage outside of the main holiday season. Next slide, please. Again, just showing the existing site. There isn't a formal internal access road to serve the site, which will change as part of the static caravan development. Next slide, please. Again, this is just facing. This is facing south. Sorry, back towards the site entrance. Next slide. This one's included along with a number of other photos just to illustrate the existing planting, which was of concern to our tree and landscape officer following his visit. He does reference quite a high failure rate in the planting, hence the need for the additional information on the gapping up, which will be secured by a condition. Next slide, please, Ellie. And again, just to show the condition of some of the planting, it's not in a great state at the moment. That's looking along the bund on the western side of the site. You can just see in the distance the A64. And then the next slide will be just panning round. Again, looking on the western perimeter bund. And next slide, please. This is along the southern boundary. And the next slide should be facing towards the eastern boundary. So as you can see, the planting is in mixed condition. In some areas it is quite effective. In other areas it's very sporadic and it does need some improvement. So next slide, please. And again, just showing the eastern bund along the site boundary. If there's another photo. So that's the last photo on the presentation. So that concludes the presentation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. There are no speakers. As far as I know, there are no speakers on this item, so I'll go straight to questions from members. So, Councillor Andrews, do you have any questions?
I'm just wondering, Chair, what are we going to do to ensure that the planting is going to be completed? The screen planting at the end boundaries of the site. Thank you, Chair.
Actually, thank you for that, Councillor Andrews. I was of the same view as you. I wanted to know. I was just trying to look at the conditions. Alan, I'm really sorry. You might be able to answer it, but I was looking for the conditions to see whether we conditioned it that the tree planting was going to be. I haven't found it yet. Sorry, Alan. Can I give it to you?
No problem, thank you. There's a condition number 9 on the report recommendation. So that will refer to the drawing that illustrates the proposed landscaping and the requirement that it's carried out during the first planting season following the commencement of development. And there's also provision for any replacement planting for any plants or shrubs, trees or shrubs, that die within the first 5 years of the application being commenced. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alan. I found it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey, any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I did have a question, actually. I was looking at the occupancy condition 11, and I mean, the development is what it is. I have to say it's pretty intensive. But in terms of impact, it's hard to differentiate between whether it's a permanent residence or a permanent holiday let. When the condition says must be holiday lets for at least 140 days a year, does that mean that you wouldn't be able to sell them to someone? My understanding of this sort of development is that people buy one and go and see it now and again or with their friends through the summer. That's sort of different from being available for holiday lets, I wonder.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Yes, the condition does require use for holiday purposes. It is possible for the individual units to be sold off. We don't control the ownership. It could either be operated as a whole by one landowner or owned individually. So it can be used for the owner's own purposes, but not for obviously their sole place of occupation. It is restricted to holiday purposes, and the restriction on the length of time that it can be used. The 140 days is, I think that's linked to, I think the council tax is also linked to that requirement, but that is the standard condition that does control these types of developments.
Any further questions, Councillor Burley, or are you satisfied? Sorry.
I am satisfied. It's just being available for lets for 140 days doesn't really describe somebody buying one as a holiday getaway. But if you're happy it's robust and secure, and that's doing the purpose. Like I say, it seems strange to differentiate the impact, but that's the policy, isn't it? No, I'm happy, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
No questions, thank you, Madam Chairman.
I got a question, Alan, just to pick up on what Councillor Bailey raised. We are, even if someone bought this as a unit to own, they would be limited to spending no more than 31 days at any consecutive time on the site. So they could go away for a fortnight and come back for a month. Is that my understanding of this?
Yes, that is correct, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Councillor Hope.
No questions, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Not really. I'm just trying to ascertain whether there's an environmental impact being done on it, really. But if the occupancy is that low, then it doesn't make any real difference to the other caravans on there. But I'm not sure if one's been done or not. I can't seem to find one. Has an environmental impact been done? Assessment been done?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Mason. It wouldn't trigger the IA in this case.
Okay.
Thanks. Any more questions, Councillor Mason, or am I moving on? Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Thackeray.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just interested to know from the officer, please, if he could point out where the likely burial mound is in respect of this site, because it strikes me that the most significant element of this site is its archaeological, described here as high archaeological sensitivity, and there's supposedly a burial mound to be investigated in the centre of this site, and there is a prehistoric settlement and ritual activity. There's a linear trackway and dike across the plan, but none of these, to my eyes anyway, I know the plan's a little rather small scale, but I don't see any identification of what I would describe as the most significant elements of the site themselves marked on the drawing, because clearly the conditions, if I get back to the right page, 6, 7 and 8, I think, refer to the various investigations and potential deposit of fines and so on and so forth that accompany the application. But there's no indication anyway of where these treasures may be.
Thank you,
I found a bit weird.
Thank you, Councillor Thackeray. Alan, can I hand it over to you?
Thank you, Councillor Thackeray. No, there is no plan that shows any exact position of archaeology at the current time. The condition that's been recommended by the county archaeologist will be based on the records he holds and the likelihood of remains being found. And the detailed condition is a standard approach to being able to respond to what is found as part of the construction works on site. which in this case would largely relate to the excavations for the access road. So that condition will require the applicant and developer to follow those specific steps to ensure that whatever is discovered is mitigated and recorded appropriately.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Anything else, Councillor Thackeray?
No, other than I think it would be interesting to contact Professor Dominic Palsland of the Landscape Research Centre, who is probably the most knowledgeable man about all the archaeological sites within 20 miles along that road. I think we should, as a council, consult him.
Let's pick that up in debate, please, Councillor Thackeray. Councillor Windrus.
No questions, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'll move into debate. And I don't think we have a local member for the area, because I think it's Councillor Nathan Garbutt-Moore that covers East Heslington.
It's Councillor Raper, actually.
Right, Councillor Raper. Well, so we still don't have a local member. Does anybody want to pick this up and start the debate? Otherwise, I'll start at the top of the list with Councillor Andrews. Councillor Andrews.
I haven't got anything to say, Chair. I think the principle of development has been established, and this actually represents a less dense development than what was proposed originally. But I can't see that we can object to it. But on the other hand, I think we must be very careful in making sure that landscaping scheme is carried out. And that we carry out checks to make sure it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Andrews. The precedent's there. It's important that we get the development as proposed, or it could be quite an eyesore. But otherwise, it's what it is. I'd second it.
Thank you. Did Councillor Andrews propose it? Or were you just...
If you wish, Chair, I will propose it.
I'm not looking for I wasn't looking, but I didn't know whether Councillor Bailey was supporting your condition or supporting the application. Sorry.
I'll propose it, Chair.
You'll propose. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Bailey, were you supporting the condition or the application? Sorry.
No, to move business, I'll second it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I will support this. It is, after all, Ryedale's biggest industry. I think Councillor Thackeray probably, if he comes on later on, will want to add a condition beefing up the archaeological protection. And I think just to reinforce Councillor Andrews' concerns on the landscaping planting, I wonder if we should beef it up by saying and thereafter maintained, rather than simply leave it to 5 years. But other than that, I would support the application. Thank you.
Councillor Cleary, do you wish to move that as an extra condition or an amendment to the condition?
I think I do. Yes, please, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
I would accept that, Chair.
Councillor Bailey's got a thumbs up, and it sounds like Councillor Andrews is supporting as well. So we'll put that to the officers towards the end and see what response we get. Councillor Hope.
Yeah, just to support what Councillor Cleary said, I think that's important.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mason.
No comment.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As has already been said, tourism is very important to Ryedale, and I think it's an appropriate thing to support, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would echo what's been said already, but certainly that area has some very significant archaeological interest from Starcar all the way along, and providing that we're satisfied that the conditions are robust enough to make sure that there's no real damage to the archaeology, I can support this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Thackeray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just an item which is, I think, in conditions. I'm sorry, I've got that many pieces of paper in this pack like everyone else. I'll just imagine that I've read this, that an officer of the council can inspect the lettings records of this organisation to check that these properties are not being lived in as permanent residences. And I would like to see that happen, please.
That's condition 11, Councillor Thackeray, down at the bottom.
Yeah.
On page 44.
Yeah. I'll find it again. Here we are. Well, anyway, that was really it. It's just to reinforce that, please, and for it to be something that actually takes place, because I suspect, I don't know, that there are establishments around the place that are probably occupied outside of their conditioned use. That would just be my guess. I'm not saying for a moment that this relates to this development at all, but I think it's something that's conditioned and we should follow it up.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Thackeray, you mentioned something about the archaeology.
Yes, I did. I mentioned Professor Dominic Powsland, who lives in Yeddingham, who is the man that for 30 years plus has been involved in the Heslerton dig and knows more about the archaeology of this district than probably anyone alive. And I think, given his knowledge of the specific lie of the land, that we ought to consult him.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Windruss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Nothing to add, but I'm supportive of this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the chair, my understanding is, and I may be straying back into questions here, so forgive me. My understanding is that there is already an extant planning permission for 65 caravans. So this would actually reduce the number to 40, I think it's 47. So we're actually reducing the density of the site. I'm looking at the condition 6, which says that there should be nomination of a competent person to undertake the work set out in the written scheme of investigation. I think that, for me, is quite important, because if there are significant archaeological remains on the site, they do need to be protected. And if they are there, they need to be protected and recorded if possible. And I'm just slightly uncomfortable that this might get lost in the ether. Gary, you've got your hand up. Please come in and help me out.
Yeah, but believe me, these don't get lost in the ether. The archaeologists get very excited every time we get anything on the Vale of Pickering. And so with that in mind, I think I'm right in saying that on occasions we've had a written scheme of investigation submitted by a certain Mr. Powsland on behalf of landowners in the vicinity. But I think that does come back to the point of who we consult. And when we get whoever does the written scheme of investigation, which has to be submitted by a person or a practice of suitable archaeological knowledge, skills and expertise, it's at that point then we consult with Peter Rowe at the County Council, who is actually the person who then gets to do the clearance. So that's the process that we would go to. But I can assure you that any written scheme of investigation is actually, if you ever get the chance to look at one, is usually a fairly weighty document, especially when, having risk assessed it, that's what the archaeologists are saying they need to have the certain assurances. So all of the details in the document, and they don't then sign those off until they're happy with whatever's been put forward for, investigation, excavation, whatever associated with the ground disturbance works. And then on the conditions, as you'll see, in addition to the submission of the WSI, then you have to carry it out in accordance with the WSI, and sometimes that will involve them specifying, notifying the archaeologist when the works are actually carrying out on site, so they can go and look if they think they need to. So it's quite a thorough process. I've worked for quite a number of authorities, and I think the county council, certainly in parts of Ryedale, because of the archaeology, is very thorough.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm much relieved. And can I just pick up with you or Alan? I know Councillor Cleary was looking to strengthen the condition with regard to the planting from 5 years to on an ongoing basis. Is that correct, Councillor Cleary?
Thank you. Yes, just reading the condition, it seemed to limit it to the 5 years. Given the sandy nature of the soil and the fact that these plants are planted on a bund, I suspect until they actually get well established, that there's an ongoing risk that they'll drought out and die off. So I think rather than limit it to 5 years, it should be an ongoing thing.
Is that within our scope to ask for that within the conditions, can I ask?
Well, you could do that, Chairman. I think it's a question of horses for courses, really. And I think the way that this condition should work, is intended to work, is that there is that sort of, we get the scheme, we agree the scheme's then planted, and we then review the success of that planting during that first 5 years. And that may occur at certain points during those 5 years, and then failures are identified, because the experience has shown that the failures tend to be in the early stages of planting, rather than you get to 5 years and then you do the visit. It's sort of a rolling thing anyway. But it's one of those where if we say inspected in year 2 and everything was fine and hunky-dory, and then we inspected in year 4 that it isn't, then that would require replanting at that point. So it is almost like a rolling thing that happens, but it's very much focused on failures in the early years. And that 5-year condition is it's pretty much almost like a national standard. It's one that most authorities seem to use and the inspectorates seem to use.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Cleary, are you happy with that?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yes, no, I have to say, I'm happy with what Gary said. I suspect, in fact, that the operator of the site, or owner-operator of the site, would want to keep it capped up anyway. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Right, members, it has been proposed and seconded for approval. So if no one else has anything further to add, we'll go to the vote, if that's okay. Okay. Councillor Andrews.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
4.
Councillor Cleary.
4.
I am 4. Councillor Goodrick is 4. Councillor Hope.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thackeray.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Windress.
4, thank you.
Thank you very much, members. That's 10 votes for. It is unanimous for approval. Thank you very much. Can we now move on to agenda item 9, which is on page 59 of your, page 62 of your agendas. And this is application number 20/00695, full, and it's the change of use and alteration of farm buildings to form a mixed-use events venue and barn. I am going to go straight to the local member with this, because I think the papers are suggesting that we have a site visit. So, Councillor Windress, are you happy to go with this?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. It is creating quite a lot of interest locally, so I think a site visit would be very useful. So I'll move a site visit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder, or I'm happy to second from
Chair, I will second it, but I do believe that Councillor Thackeray has some comments to make on this one. And I think those comments should be made before we go to the vote.
I think if it's moved and seconded for a site visit, then that's where the consideration of the application stops till after the site visit. Councillor Andrews.
Well, no, I'm not asking you. I'm not asking. I don't think Councillor Thackeray is asking for consideration of any facts. What he's asking is that certain steps are taken at the site visit in order to assist members so that they are able to assess the impact of the site on neighbouring property. And I would ask you, Chair, to listen to Councillor Thackeray first. He's not actually asking us to either approve or disapprove or consider the merits at all.
Gary.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, clearly the essence of the recommendation tonight is to take a decision on members undertaking a site visit if we're in a position to do so, or alternatively then do the virtual site inspection that we've agreed for other similar circumstances at the last meeting. I think if what Councillor Thackeray is wishing to do tonight is merely to assist in terms of pointing out factual information that members may wish to address during the site visit, then I think that's perhaps okay. I think the dilemma is if we start to err from that or drift from that into essence of merit or whatever, then I think I'd have to pull the drawbridge up at that point, because clearly, we've told other speakers that it's not a speaking item tonight.
Okay. Councillor Thackeray, are you happy to perhaps give us your thoughts, but if Gary feels that we're straying off the path, are you happy for him then to stop us?
Well, yes, I am. If I can just make my suggestions, and then Gary or yourself can decide whether or not you want to adopt the ideas or not. I know that this. I've read this, report very carefully, and I've read other reports of the company, the application. And one of the most difficult things from my experience is being able to visualize and imagine one particular sense that we all possess, and that is sound, and to be able to experience sound. And my recommendation really was simply that when we take a site visit, which I hope we will, that we provide some equipment to produce sound from the application site, so that members can, from the village of Sproxton, determine whether or not they can hear or what they can hear. That was really it. It was simply to furnish ourselves with a PA system, of which I know quite a bit about, and an engineer, and simply project sound and see how far it travels. Because with the best will in the world, unless people have got better imaginations than I have, seeing the word dB, decibel, written on a piece of paper, and then being able to actually understand what that impact will be when the time comes is not possible. I know it seems like a peculiar idea, but we are talking about the big issue with an application like this is its impact on other people, and that is likely to be audible noise.
Simon,
and the other point was simply to go back to the suggestion that I made last week's meeting or whenever, was to actually create and provide ourselves and members of the public with some drone film to show the lie of the land. And that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Gary, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think the essence of the request in relation to noise, I think, is an interesting one. I think it's something that I'd need to run past our environmental health officer, which I'm more than willing to do. I think the essence of noise, however, is that it's variable, dependent on so many things. Not least the time of the day that persons are experiencing it, as I'm sure you're very much personally aware, Chairman. But also in terms of what the intended use of the buildings and the site might be in terms of where the noise sources are and what happens within certain buildings as opposed to outside of the buildings. And if that, as so many occasions happens, that actually it might be happening within a building, but that building wouldn't be used until it's attenuated to a standard and with doors shut and things like that. That may not be representative if we're not replicating the as would be operated situation. So it's certainly an idea I'm prepared to take away and have that discussion with Robert Robinson as the head of the team as to the practicalities of it. But it may well have some limitations in actual, giving a proper representation of what might be experienced, say, at 9 o'clock in the evening, as opposed to, 10 o'clock in the morning, where ambient noise levels will be that little bit higher. But as I say, the site visits are a fact-finding tool. So whatever facts we think we can accurately replicate, then we'll look at that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Gary. Yes, I'm very well aware of noise nuisance and the attenuation measures that you have to put in place to make it come within the acceptable parameters. So yeah, I've got two more people, and I'm hoping this isn't to turn it into a debate, guys. So
no, it's fine. It's fine. It's just a question.
Councillor Mason.
Question, Gary. Actually, and this does feed into another thing. It's a really good point that Simon makes. And this is a question that I'd like asking: what is the acceptable level of decibels in rural areas? Because I know this is something that's going to be coming up in the future, and maybe we could have that somewhere, because I have no idea what an acceptable level of decibels is in a rural area when a development is being applied for. Particularly when some people do have quite loud noises at night time, existing developments and the new developments. So I'm not sure whether what is an acceptable level of noise in a rural area through the night, for instance, at 11 o'clock at night for a wedding, compared to industrial process, for instance. So I'd just be interested to see what is there a measurement?
Chairman, these are questions probably best answered outside of planning committee, but in essence, what we're dealing with in planning is an assessment of impacts on amenity. And that is different from statutory noise nuisance. Yeah. And statutory noise nuisance will have its roots based in numbers of decibels above background and ambient levels, which will vary from one part of the day to the next or into the night.
Yeah.
You will make planning judgments, whereas the environmental health officer will have a noise level reading out there and do monitoring and present something which is at a level which, if it's X dBA above background, it's starting to be a nuisance if it's over a period of time. But it's a different assessment.
Okay.
Still noise, but you're making a different judgment.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, it wasn't to prolong this, but is it worth asking Robert Robinson to be part of that site visit so that if members have questions with regard to noise, we've an officer there that can answer them?
That was occurring to me as you were saying the question, is that we can, as we sometimes we'll have a highway issue, we'll invite the highway engineer along. Clearly, noise is a consideration in a what could be a quiet rural location, and it strikes me that as and when we can either have the site visit or the virtual site visit, that Rob, is asked to, if he can attend, or an officer of his team can attend to answer any queries that members may have on that particular technical issue.
Okay, thank you for that. That was just a thought process. I mean,
thank you, Gary.
I'm so aware of the technical issues that I probably know what those are. Councillor Andrews, you've got your hand up, please.
Yes, Chair. I was just thinking that perhaps the answer is for the location where the noise source is located should be agreed with the applicant initially, and then when we get to the site, if members or Mr. Robinson think that they would like to hear the noise from a different angle or in a different place, then that can be sorted and agreed at the site meeting itself. Thank you, Chair.
Gary.
Chairman, just to come back, I mean, at this stage, I'm not advising members that this will happen. What I'm saying to you is that the issue has been raised, and I'll take the advice of the environmental health officer on the sense of doing that, trying to measure a noise at a given point in time. But I think whatever happens, I think what we can try and do is get the environmental health officer or a representative from that team at the site inspection.
Yeah, thank you. That would be cool. Councillor Bailey, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to prolong this. To me, I know the access quite well, and to me that's going to be a matter of significance. Just looking at the access statement, and often for these sort of developments, a travel plan is sort of put forward that can be accepted as part of the proposal, if you like. I just wondered whether we could give some consideration to that in the time available.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rather than ask for details of the site visit, I was merely going to second the proposal that we have a site visit.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Right. There are still members with their hands up, Councillor Mason and Councillor Andrews. If we've done your questions and answered them, would you like to put them down for me? Councillor Andrews, I take it that you've got another question. Councillor Andrews?
Yes, I'll go along with the site visit, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Paul, could you put your hand down for me on your... Thank you very much. Gary, have you? Thank you. Right, it has been moved and seconded for a site visit. So I'm going to go down the list. Thank you, members. Councillor Andrews.
Agree, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
For.
Thank you. I am for. Councillor Goodrick for. Councillor Hope.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Thackeray.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Windrus.
For.
Thank you. That's a unanimous vote again, members. We will be having a site visit, or if we are not able to comply with the COVID regulations, a virtual site visit. Not ideal, I will admit. Right, thank you for that, members. Can we move on now to application number 10, which is application number 20/00848/House. This is for the erection of a rear two-storey extension with an attached single-storey garden room and front porch. And this is revised details to a previous approval from 2013. And then the erection of a detached garden room, which is part retrospective. And I think the officer on this one is Ellie Thompson.
Yes, it is, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you. Members, this is a part retrospective application for a part two-storey, part single-storey rear extension and a detached garden office building. It's been submitted following an enforcement complaint which came in September. The application site is located off Common Lane in Wart Hill and consists of a large detached dwelling which is set back from the highway within a large narrow plot that runs roughly from the east to the west. Members will note from the site location plan dated September 2020 that the site has quite an unusual shape in that it doglegs slightly towards the north. The extensions to the property are relatively large. However, members will note from the report that there is an existing permission for an extension to the property that was granted in 2013, which is very similar in scale, form and proportion to the development proposed. It is understood that during the course of constructing the approved extension, the applicant has experienced difficulties with construction and contractors, and that this has resulted in the extension being built slightly larger than the existing permission. So this is why this application has been made to regularise those details. The report details the differences between the current permission and what has been built. It is considered that most significantly, the two-storey extension as built is approximately 0.5 metres deeper and 0.4 metres wider than what was previously approved. And the overall footprint of the entire extension is approximately 4 square metres larger than what was previously approved. The front porch extension as built is approximately 0.3 metres taller than what was previously approved and is 1 square metre larger in area. There have also been some changes to the fenestration detailing on the extension. As members will see from the report, the neighbour to the south has objected to the application and the parish council has also objected. The neighbour to the north has also submitted some comments. These comments and objections, including concerns over the size and the scale of the development and the impact on neighbouring amenity, are detailed and considered within the officer's report. We have also received 6 letters of support for the application, and the local highway authority has confirmed they have no objections to the scheme. All of the issues are outlined in the report, and on balance and taking into account the fallback position, it is considered that the proposal is acceptable. I do have a very minor factual update to the report. The approved 2-storey extension had a depth of 3.4 metres, not 3.5. So the increase to what has been built is 0.5 metres, not 0.6, as it states on page 113 of the agenda. And there also are a number of plans appended to the agenda. So in the interests of clarity, I'd just like to make members aware that the most up-to-date site location plan is the as-built plan dated September 2020 on page 133 of the agenda. The plans on pages 122 to 124 are the approved plans from the 2013 permission, and the plans on the blue graph paper from pages 126 to 131 are the current proposed plans. If I could also just quickly draw your attention to the late pages, we have had a further contribution from the neighbour who is objecting to the scheme, who has submitted the previously approved plans, a copy of an email from the officer who negotiated the approved scheme, together with initials superseded southern elevation plan. Thank you, Madam Chairman. There are no more updates and the recommendation is as outlined. So if we could just go through the photos quickly. So this photo shows the location of the property in the village. You can see that the properties on that side of Common Lane are quite set back from the highway, and you can also see that the slight dog leg shape of the site, in that it sort of goes towards the north slightly.
Ellie, can I just pause you just for a second? Can members see the plans and the photographs and things from Ellie? Because right now I can't. Councillor Bailey, you
yes,
can't.
I can.
Yeah, I've got the photo here.
Yeah, I can see them okay, thanks.
Okay, Ellie.
I can't see, Madam.
You can't. Was that Councillor Windress?
Yeah.
No. There are a number of members can't see these plans and photos. I'm slightly worried.
Is it just iPads? Can people see them on iPads?
Yeah, I'm on a laptop.
Right. I can only assume it's the iPads, Jim. Right, sorry, Ellie, do carry on. We'll have to go with
just
it.
Just on the iPad subject, my iPad works fine.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Thackeray. Sorry, Ellie, carry on. Sorry, it just means that we can't see. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If we could move on to the next photo, please, Ellie. So this photo shows the front of the property from the public highway. The property is the building in the middle there. You can see that they are quite well spaced, the properties on this side of the lane, and you can also see that there isn't much of the extension which is visible from this vantage point, as it's to the rear. Next photo, please, Ellie. This is the front of the property. You can see that the porch extension the majority of it has been built. And you can also see down the left-hand side of the property a section of the single-storey extension which sort of curves that way to align with the shape of the plot. Next photo, please, Ellie. So this is taken from the rear of the property. You can see sort of at the back there the two-storey pitched roof section of the extension, and slightly further forward the single-storey kind of block extension with a large kind of corner opening which will be glazed. Next photo, please, Ellie. The brick building in the middle of this photo is the garden office building. The applicant started building this building under permitted development rights. However, when it became clear he was going to submit this further application, he decided that he would like to add a warm roof to the building, which would take it over 2.5 metres in height. So it does need to be included in this application. And I think it's worth noting as well its orientation with the surrounding buildings. So the existing double garage is the building sort of to the left with the plant growing on it, and it's kind of set between that and the boundary with the neighbour to the north, and they have an extended garage building which you can see kind of just above it. The timber building there, that's a potting shed which has been built under permitted development rights. Thank you, Ellie. Next picture. So this is taken sort of looking from the north. You can see the width, rather the depth of the two-storey extension, and that section of the single storey is the section with the parapet. So that is 4 metres in height. This elevation has changed slightly from the previously approved scheme, in that the previously approved plans had 3 vertical windows at ground floor level. However, this has been changed to 2 horizontal high level windows. Thanks, Ellie. Next picture. So that's another photo of that area there. You can see the difference in height between the section of the wall with the parapet and the single storey extension. I think it's about 0.5 metre, if a little bit less. Okay, thanks, Ellie. Next picture. This photo has been taken from the neighbouring property to the south, which shows the depth of the two-storey element of the extension. So that measures, I think it's about 3.9 metres, which is approximately 0.5 metre more than what was previously approved. I think roughly that's 2 or 3 bricks more in depth than what the applicant currently has permission for. Okay, next picture please, Ellie, thank you. That's just another photo sort of showing that area and the relationship between the buildings in this area. Thank you, Ellie. Next picture. This photo shows the rear elevation of the two-storey section of the extension, taken again from the neighbouring property to the south, part of their rear garden. I think it's worth noting that on the previously approved scheme, there were also 4 windows in the rear elevation of the two-storey section. However, they were set so 0.5 metres further away. However, they would have resulted in the same view of this section of the neighbouring garden. Thanks, Ellie. Next picture. So that's another photo sort of showing you the orientation of the extension with the neighbouring property and the neighbouring garden. Thanks, Ellie. Next picture. And that is just sort of facing directly towards the application site from the neighbouring garden. As you can see, there's a slight gap in the hedge. However, new hedging has been planted in that gap, and you can see the single storey element of the extension just slightly above the fence there. Thank you, Ellie. Next picture. So this photo has been taken from the very back of the neighbouring property's garden. So you can see that there is a very mature, tall boundary hedge between the two properties. So whilst the sort of middle section can be seen from the upstairs windows of the extension, the majority of the sort of back lawn area is quite well screened. Thank you, Ellie. Next picture. This photo is taken from a public right-of-way which runs sort of behind the plots further to the east. I think some concern had been raised that the extension would have an impact on the public right-of-way. However, as you can see from the image, the sort of rear boundaries of those properties on Common Lane are very well screened. You can't see it. You can't see the proposed what has been built from the public right of way. It doesn't have an impact. Thank you, Madam Chairman. There are no more photos.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Thank you for the report. Very comprehensive. And I should just reassure members, I saw those photos today, early this afternoon. So it's not that I'm unfamiliar with it. They just couldn't see them at the presentation now. We have a number of speakers on this item, so I will invite we have 4 speakers, in fact, members. So you'll have to be patient with me. If I can invite the chairman of the parish council, Henry Whitten, to come forward and speak. Each speaker has 3 minutes, and I will give you a prompt to tell you when you've got 30 seconds left, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Hello, my name is Henry Whitten. I'm speaking on behalf of the Warts Hill Parish Council. The Parish Council's main concern with this application is in relation to the 2-storey element of the extension at the rear. The 2-storey extension that has been built would appear to be on a similar scale to the drawings which were superseded during the application process in 2013. These drawings were superseded because of concerns by Ryedale Planning Department over the shape of the extension, but also the width and the depth of the 2-storey extension. The Parish Council at the time supported the application on the basis of the updated and approved drawings. The Parish Council have no concerns with the view of the extension from the front of the property. In fact, we consider the aspect from this point of view to be quite sensitively designed, nor do we have any concerns of the view from the bridle path leading to Gate Helmsley on the photo that you've just seen. However, when viewing the extension from the neighbouring property, Isker House, the additional depth of the 2-storey extension compared to the 2013 approval, which you've just heard, has been revised to ½ a metre. Whilst on the face of it may appear minor, it is over 4 metres in height, and as a result, we consider that it does have an effect on the amenity of Isker House. And due to the extension being in close proximity to the boundary, the Parish Council does consider that it has an overbearing presence on Isker House. Therefore, we question whether the additional width and depth of the extension complies with SP20 of the Ryedale Plan in respect of amenity. The Parish Council also considers that the extension is out of proportion to the adjacent properties, and due to the massing caused by the additional depth and width of the 2-storey extension compared to the 2013 approval, the Parish Council consider the extension does not respect the character and context of the existing properties in accordance with SP20. I would say part of the problem here is establishing the extent of the extension back in 2013 compared to what is being applied for now in respect of the 2-storey extension. We've just heard it's ½ a metre, but it's very difficult from the drawings to ascertain this. Overall, the Parish Council considers that the development of the property, particularly in relation to the 2-storey extension, is limited to the 2013 approval, and as a result, we've objected to the application. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whitten. We now have a supporter to speak for the application, Mr. Seamerson.
Good evening. I'm John Seamerson. I've been a resident of Warth Hill for over 40 years. Having looked at the as-built work on site and the current revised application, compared to the previous approved scheme, there are clearly revisions and changes that now require approval. When viewed in detail, the revisions are of a relatively minor nature. I see nothing that's been built to date or shown on the revised application drawings that would have changed the approval decision if they had been shown on the original approved drawings. The changes and revisions appear to have occurred for various reasons: constructability, communication, misinterpretation of the drawings, and negotiated changes to the original submission. The Desports have lived and been active members of the village for around 14 years. They decided to extend and refurbish, in my opinion, a rather tired house, although financially it could have made more sense to move. The majority of the scheme cannot be viewed from the street or the neighbouring properties due to the existing boundary hedging and screening and neighbouring garages. It will, when completed, be a substantial improvement for family living. There appears no detriment to neighbouring properties in terms of the privacy, amenity, or light. Yeah, the only view and effect on the street scene is the front porch. The size of this rear extension is either in keeping with or less in scale and size than other extensions completed in the village. It is in fact considerably smaller in size, scale or mass than the majority of the extensions undertaken in recent years. The design is contemporary and of merit and will undoubtedly, when completed, be a quality upgrade to a rather tired house that had no real architectural merit, in my opinion. Designs of this quality should be encouraged. To sum up, the extension, in my opinion, is of no detriment to the village or surrounding properties, and I believe it is an enhancement. Thank you for listening to me this evening in support of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Seamerson. We now have, thank you very much. We now have the objector, Mr. McFarlane. Mr. McFarlane, you have 3 minutes. I will try and give you an audible warning when your time is we've got 30 seconds left.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. To be honest, without repeating everything, I agree wholeheartedly with everything that the Parish Council have said. So without repeating everything that they've got to say, I would only really want to make a couple of additional points. One of the additional points is that we've talked a little bit about the depth, the extra 0.5 meters, but really when you're looking at scale and bulk and subservience, the really key thing is actually the volume increase. And if you've got something that's 4 meters high by 7.6 wide and 0.5 deep, it's an extra 15 cubic meters. And that's a significant volume increase. And that does affect our amenity, and it does affect the subservience of the upper story to the original dwelling. And I think that's visible from the pictures. It's not sympathetic as a result to the original dwelling. And Alan Hunter, in his assertions looking at the original plans, was correct in pointing out the effect that the bulk and scale would have. It has been mentioned about other extensions in the village. And the applicant in document 2108671 actually refers to some of these extensions. But it's important to note that different house sizes and plots make these largely irrelevant. However, there is one that is very relevant, and that is Bracken House, which he mentions. And Bracken House is 2 doors up from where he is. It was built at the same time and to the same specification and by the same builder. And if you look at Bracken House and the photo that he's put forward of Bracken House, you know, the scale of development is very different. It's about 30 to 40% of the width of the property. And if you look at the roof line, it's a lot lower than his roof line. So there's, you know, in essence, the only comparable house has an extension which is much more amenable. And that's why it was passed, because it fitted in with a policy, whereas this does not, as Henry said, fit in with policy SP20. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McFarlane. Thank you. I will now invite the applicant, who is the Mr. Despot, to speak. Mr. Despot. Mr. Despot, are you with us?
He's on mute at the moment.
Classic on mute. Sorry. So the main work started in the house around 2018, and as building progressed, mainly some issues arose, mainly around the hasty modifications that were made in the final throes of the planning application. Moving the upper floor resulted in a number of constructability and access issues. There were some drawing issues and misinterpretations of these. The site survey was impeded by the awkwardness of the site and the access around planted areas, and there were some construction inaccuracies as well. And the project did run on longer with issues around trying to secure builders. So my family moved out of the house in February this year with the aim to complete in 6 to 9 months. COVID meant we didn't actually restart work until May, and we, because of the issue with the complaint, it stopped in July. I was aware there were some deviations and was assured that these would be considered minor and should be addressed under the minor amendment process and completion, but I recognise it would have been better to consult the council on this rather than builders, and apologise for this mistake, which was fully my responsibility. So in terms of the objections, there's, I guess, this claim that what is built is what was previously presented in a design proposal but wasn't submitted for planning permission. So this isn't the case, as the planning report confirms. It is not the extension is not the full width of the house. The proposal in this application does not extend as far as the previously discussed design. That was not submitted for planning approval, and the pre-planning proposal was in fact 25% larger than what has been built, and this has been confirmed by the planning report. So there are many similar extensions and larger extensions across the village. In terms of Bracken House, it does extend out around 30% more than this house, and in fact Hill Farmhouse has a massively larger extension in terms of both width and depth. I agree with other residents and the planning report. This proposal has no significant impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties. Views of the extension are partially blocked by next door's garage, and the property lies to the south of our property, so it's not affected by loss of light. Before the build, you were easily able to look into the bedrooms of the McFarlane's house from our garden. This is no longer possible. We've blocked up side windows that looked out across their property and patio, and had much more impact than anything that we currently have. And the McFarlane's, as you see, had a hedge that covers 95% of the back garden. And if this is extended, it should. Sorry,
Mr. Despot, you are at time. Do you want to wrap it up for the members, please?
Yeah, sure. So with the parish council, I don't think we had a proper consultation, and there are still some issues that are being reviewed regarding the consultation. I would hope that Pete and Helen McFarlane are partially reassured that the error is nowhere as bad as they had asserted. And basically, we would be very keen to just get our family back to the house, complete the build, and get back to living our lives.
Thank you very much. Right.
Councillor Goodrick, just
yes.
Something. Obviously, we've had 4 speakers speak. It's just something. One of the, I think the last speaker just mentioned something about a window that had been bricked up
yes.
on the rear elevation, and I was just wondering. I think it might be on one of the photos. If we just revert back to those, I know you can't see them, but just point out that yeah. picture. If you keep going back, yeah, that one there. So if members can just, oh, there you go. So Ellie, can you just point that one out? Right, I think Ellie's still on mute. This is
She's done it with the mouse.
All right, it's there.
It's the window-shaped brick shape.
Thank you. That's in the original gable. So the extension is roughly from the downpipe rearwards. So that window there sort of faced directly towards the boundary. as does the other one that's still in that gable. Okay, I just the last speaker made mention of that, and I don't think anybody else had mentioned it in the photos.
Okay, thank you for that, Gary. I'm going to open it up for questions, so I'll move down the list. Councillor Andrews.
Yes, Chair. Thank you. There's been a conflict of opinion between one of the objectors and the owner, Chair, the applicant rather, and that's in regard to other properties in the village. Could officers please indicate which of the two is correct, and could they indicate whether or not what has happened to other properties in the village has any bearing on this application, bearing in mind it has to be decided on the merits of this particular case, Chair?
Thank you.
Chairman, I think for me to answer that one perhaps is that Councillor Andrews, I think, has pretty much answered his own question with his final comment that we end up having to determine each application on its own merits. So I think that's where we are. Undoubtedly, there are other properties over the years, and I speak as a head of planning since 2002, that in Wart Hill, quite a number of properties, which have been larger 3 and 4 bed detached properties, have had large extensions added to them. But the circumstances of each site will differ. So some of them will have been on larger plots with bigger spacing, some more similar to this one perhaps. But the fact that an extension is large is not in itself necessarily a reason for withholding permission. I just remind members that we end up on all of these occasions having to plan in the public interest, and we make our judgments on each scheme on its merits. So I think that's where we are with this, Chairman. I mean, clearly the public interest issues in terms of how a member of the public might perceive this development is very limited. I think both from Common Lane and the public right of way. From Common Lane, the only view would be of what is the front porch, which is a fairly minor part of the development. The rear of the elevation is where obviously most of the additions are, and in that sense, whilst it is a large extension, I would struggle to suggest that in its design in itself is out of scale or out of character with the existing dwelling. So I think we come back then to the impact on the neighbour, which is the one that you've been shown the information of tonight. And that, of course, has to be set in context with the scheme that was approved in 2013, which itself was a sizable extension. So there is a fallback position here. And quite a significant one, which is why, on balance, we're recommending approval to this scheme. But ultimately, you have to judge each application on its merit.
Thank you for that, Gary. Councillor Bailey.
No questions, Chair, but I'll have a comment when the
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
No questions. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I'll come back to myself. Councillor Hope.
No questions, Chairman.
Councillor Mason.
No questions. All
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I see there was a comment somewhere about having a problem with contractors. I couldn't help but think, yeah, you're not kidding if they haven't got an effective tape measure. So I was going to ask if there was any practical reason for this extension being built the wrong size, but I think the applicant himself answered that. So I do have another question. There was a mention by one of the objectors about groundworks not being done at this particular moment in time. Now, I take it that's a building control issue rather than a planning issue, but I would just wanted to confirmation that we do have appropriate plans for the drainage for the and that they're suitable for this building. Thank you.
Chairman, I think the answer to that is yes. I mean, clearly this is an extension which will require building regs approval and will be inspected at various stages, no doubt, as they often do. What I can't tell you is, sitting here, is whether that is one of the North Yorkshire building control inspectors or whether it's an approved inspector. But either way, this development will require building regulations approval and sign-off.
Right, thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Mr. Despot, I can't bring you back into the conversation. I'm really sorry. I can see your hand is up, but I'm not able to bring you back in. Councillor Thackeray.
No questions, no comments, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Windress.
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you for that, members. I am going to come back with just a couple of questions because I'm looking at the plans on page 124 and the plans on page 129. Now, I'm not an expert, but I would say that the garden room looks as though it has extended out beyond where it originally was going to be on page 124. And an extra window has gone in that elevation, which looks back towards the main street. Not that you'll see it from the main street, but there's definitely an extra window gone in there. And also, it looks to me as the corner that was chopped off on the plans on page 124, by virtue of the fact that the garden room, I assume, has moved forward, suddenly has 3 nice corners instead of 2 nice corners. Is that correct? Is that what I'm looking at?
I think that's correct, Chairman. I'll jump in. I'm not sure whether Ellie's muted or not, but I think that is correct, Chairman. The single-storey element is the element of the scheme that was described, and it is different, in that sense. Yeah. I don't think, having said that, it's the single-storey element that has been the one that's caused the great issue in terms of impact, shall we say, beyond the site. It's more the 2-storey element that is the big cause for concern. Is my reading of the comments, in the round.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm just trying to get the view of how it's changed from what it was. Okay, thank you. Right, I will open it up to debate. So I'll come to. It would normally go to the local member, but I'm the local member, so I will sit on my hands on this one and let everybody else have their go. So, Councillor Andrews.
Well, Chairman, I'm not really happy about this because when you see it from the neighbour's property, from the picture of from the neighbour's property, it does look dominant, and I can understand why he's upset, and I can also understand why the parish council oppose it. I was tempted first of all to think, well, he's got planning permission; it's going to be very difficult to refuse. But then the planning officer has stated that it is a balanced judgment, and I think if I have to make a balanced judgment, I would come down on voting against it, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Bailey.
Thanks, Chair. It's a tricky one, but when we're dealing with something that's retrospective, then my understanding is that you imagine that it wasn't there and say, would you have given it permission if they'd come and asked for this in the first place? And if they come with the existing plan, which was admittedly big, and say, can we make this half a metre bigger all around? They'd probably have said no, just because it was already big enough. And Councillor Potter commented, I've never seen a mistaken, I've never seen a development mistakenly made smaller, I have to say. They always seem to grow. That's just having done the job for a long time. But my real problem is that, as the Director of Planning says, it really comes down to the impact of the extra development upon the neighbour. And I have no picture of it. I haven't seen a picture of this. I really don't feel, not having seen the photographs, that I've got the tools to judge that. And so I think, to be honest, I'd be wise to just abstain for this one.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, interesting. Certainly, I'm thanking my colleague, Councillor Bailey, for reminding us what we have to try and picture. We do get frustrated sometimes when we get retrospective applications, and particularly when builders make mistakes, which we find very difficult to imagine how that happens. And we do have to put that behind us and just deal with them on the planning merit. The difference we have with this one is that we've been furnished through the late pages with a warning during the planning process from the then Development Management Officer, Mr. Hunter, which I would have thought should have been a reminder to the applicant and the builder in particular to pay attention to that particular aspect where a mistake has been made. But we have to look at it. I mean, frankly, the difference between the as-built and the consent is, relatively minor. I mean, the permission given is a bit of a monster, to be honest. Looking at the photographs of the very good report we've seen, so I'll listen to the rest of the debate. It is a balanced decision, so I'll listen to the rest of the debate. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Hope.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Likewise, I think I'll listen to the rest of it. It's complicated.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
I'm tempted to say likewise, but I have to follow Jim, actually. This is a balanced decision, and I have seen the pictures, and yeah, Michael, you're right. It is so annoying. This is my second year on planning now, and the frustration that the planning committee seems to have with builders making these mistakes does seem to be quite a regular occurrence, I think. But on the decision of just this one, the photos, it does look quite imposing, but I'm going to listen to the rest of the debate. I'll be interested what other members say before I actually make a decision on this. I'm leaning towards Paul at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Potter. Oh, sorry, I've missed Councillor Mackenzie. Sorry, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. My view is that it's a family that have lived here in this village for a long, long time, well-established family, wanting to remain there. It's an extension to their home, and I will be happy to endorse the officer's recommendation, and I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, very much endorse what all the others have been saying, and particularly what Jim said about you never see anything built just a bit too small, do you? This does appear to be overbearing and not particularly sympathetic in scale to the main building. And yes, it's always a bit irritating with retrospectives and whatever excuses when there should be quite clear plans. And Michael's comment about the late pages and the exchange with the planning officer really should have highlighted all this. But on balance, I'm afraid, the impact other than to the neighbour, I don't see as particularly great, which isn't good for the neighbour, obviously. But I can't see enough basis for refusal of this application. So I think I shall reluctantly have to support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Thackeray.
Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I suppose, and I tend to concur with Councillor Potter and Councillor Bailey. In fact, most of the councillors, really. In an ideal world, I think one would knock it down and start again, but we don't live in an ideal world. Might be good if we could condition painting the name of the builder high up on the roof somewhere, so it could be seen from Ryanair as they fly over. But failing that, I think it is as it is. Unfortunate.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thackeray. Councillor Windress.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Unfortunately, I couldn't see any of the photos on the screen. However, I have seen the plans and read the comprehensive report, and they are only minor revisions in my view and in the officer's view, and I'll take the officer's recommendation and support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Windress. I'm going to wade in because this is my ward, and as the local councillor, I have to say, on balance and on paper, it looks like these are somewhat minor revisions to the extant planning permission that already exists. I have to say, I do not like retrospective applications. If you made an application in the beginning, then you know that the application should be made and revised if you change things. So I'm very disappointed that we've got retrospective planning applications or parts of it as such. I'm very worried when builders can't read a tape measure. You know, I can read a tape measure, so can a builder. So I'm really disappointed about that. I look at this and on paper it looks as though it's nothing. But actually when you see the photos, and I did see them this afternoon and I have been to have a look, it is the extension to the house, and my view about extensions to houses in general, they should be subservient to the house. There is nothing subservient about this extension. However, I've looked at the report and I'm going to probably disappoint the objector because I can't see enough reasons, despite the fact that it's retrospective, despite the fact that it's not built to plan, to actually say no. Because I don't think if this went to appeal, we would win the appeal. I think the inspector would think that we were being probably over enthusiastic in trying to enforce on this one. So I think our enforcement capabilities are significantly reduced. And I am deeply regretful that I have to support the officer's recommendation. Very deeply regretful about that. But I will support the officer's recommendation, but I'm not going to move approval. Councillor Mason.
Yeah, just note really more than anything else that having had a planning application just gone through and the backwards to and froing with the officers on subservient extension developments, you know, as someone, this is me more as a member of the public really. So I mean, if I submit an application, I have to go through all these hoops just to find that other people are then getting around these hoops. I just like to note that in the record really, that it is really quite galling for other applicants who follow the rules and the builders that follow the rules, and I think that needs to be noted. I think in this, but reluctantly, I think we don't really have a choice.
Okay, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I thoroughly endorse what Councillor Mason just said, and also picking up on what something Mr. Housden said earlier. It sort of comes back to the perception of not what the applicant's doing, but how the council and this committee deals with its own policy. I think you're quite right that we are hamstrung by the policy or by the what we're able to do, and maybe that's something that the policy reviewers can visit when as the local plan is reviewed, to actually give us a bit more ability to control what happens, particularly in light of retrospective or mistakes that are made.
Okay. Sorry, Gary, you put your hand up. Would you like to come in? Sorry. You're on mute.
Sorry, I inadvertently pressed the button.
Okay. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to everything, taking everything into consideration, I would like to move approval on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Andrews, you had your hand up and it's disappeared. Did you want to comment or not?
Yes, Chair. Merely to say that we don't have to take any action to take anything down. But I really can't see how we can grant planning permission, because all that happens is the news gets round that if you get permission and then you build something different, well, it's okay. The council will pass it in the end. Maybe the inspector would grant permission, Chair, but I really do think that the applicant the applicant should be made to go through the hoops and actually go to appeal. And I really also think, Chair, that I don't see any problem in doing this, because the planning officer has indicated this is a balanced decision, so we're not going to get costs awarded against us. And I think we should show support for the parish council, Chair. And I will be voting against this. But can I just suggest one way of going about this? We've had a proposal for approval. Can we just go through the application through the voting on the basis of either for or against? Then we can have a decision that way.
Thank you. Gary.
Chairman, I've got my hand up this time because what Councillor Andrews has just said is just not tenable. We couldn't refuse the application and then not do anything about it, because what's staring us in the face then would be an unauthorised development, and the logical path of action then would be to serve some form of enforcement notice to require something to be done. At that point, you're dealing with a planning refusal appeal and an enforcement notice appeal. So that's not really tenable. When you get into a situation where you're taking enforcement action, we are required as a planning authority to decide whether it is expedient to take enforcement action. And the report wrestles with that issue in terms of what the fallback position is. And if you look at realistically what an inspector is likely to do to that, because the concentration is really about the additional impact of the enlarged two-storey element of the extension, I would suggest to you that the overlooking of the approved scheme is practically the same as the as-built situation. And the most obvious change in terms of the impact on the neighbour is the additional rearward amount of the extension, which we've heard is about 0.5 metre. I think the likelihood is what an inspector would do with that, based on previous decisions on domestic extensions, is that we would not win that appeal. And that's my judgment, but that's not to say that an inspector might not come along and say that we're being unreasonable. So I couldn't sit here today and guarantee you that if we were dealing with that we wouldn't be facing a costs claim. Nobody knows that. But I think the report is balanced, and it does wrestle with the issues that we're left to wrestle with today, which is what is the additional impact? And that additional impact is not that great to withhold consent. Officers are equally frustrated when these things happen, but we are where we are, and I think the correct planning decision is the one as recommended.
Thanks, Gary. Councillor Mason.
Yeah, really. Maybe this is for after we discuss the other things, but can we have some information from the planning officers on what we can do about this when this arises in the future, so we put it into the local plan? Because it seems that, like I said, this is my second year now. We've had 4 or 5 come through since I've been here, and we seem to be, our hands are tied, and I would like to know how we untie our hands so this doesn't happen in the next stage of the planning of the local plan. Because it just seems to me, as Paul mentioned, builders out there who, the less scrupulous builders out there will go, well, if we just push the boundaries, they're going to approve every time. So I think we need to give ourselves the ammunition to not have this happen. But I don't know how that would be. Now, I assume that would be a recommendation from you, Gary, and your team.
Well, I think, there's probably discussions for outside of this particular debate, but I think the essence that we have is through the current plan-led system with the policies as we currently have them, white paper aside, okay. If we're still in a situation where we're making judgments, then you will always have these issues of making judgment calls. Okay, so most of your policies relating to how we address design or more of the generic development management issues about extensions and things of that ilk are criteria based. So there isn't a black and white line at which point an extension becomes acceptable or unacceptable. You take what you've got before you and make those judgment calls. So you're always in that slight problem of not having a policy that is as prescriptive as maybe you would like it, so that you can get to a point where a developer's got a clear black and white, oh, if it's 6 meters long, you'll get a permission. If it's 7, you won't. Because it just doesn't work like that. You assess the issues in terms of either design, amenity, daylighting, sunlighting. I mean, in this instance, the property as extended is on the north side of the property most affected. So there's no sunlighting issue. There's no shadowing issue.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it's been approved before though, and they haven't come back, and now it's changed to the planning approval that was before,
Yeah.
and it's changed noticeably. That's my point. Once we've approved it, I take your point on approving these planning applications, but it's now gone beyond that planning application that was originally approved, and that's the bit that it just says, give them an inch, they'll take a mile.
Well, I think that might be your perception. The perception of my own perception is 95% of the builders out there, probably more, are reputable builders who know how to read a tape measure. I don't know who's built this, but what I can tell you is that it was well advanced before we got to know that there was something wrong here. So by that time, the horse has already bolted. And then in terms of any decisions that we as a planning committee have to make based on expediency, are coloured by the fact that the thing's got a roof on it. So the remedy is disproportionate to the breach, okay, in that sense. But when you look at it, if we'd have been faced with that, the 2013 application, which wasn't that dissimilar to that, had no objection from the parish council and no objection from any neighbours. So that's how the 2013 permission got permission. And it was markedly different from this. It had a flat roof with some sort of weird hip roof design and was much, much longer. So what has been built is not that dissimilar from what got permission and is a country mile different from what was originally submitted in 2013. So, that's how these things, when you get involved in negotiations, things are not precise. I can't tell you how it's arrived at, but we've now got to make a decision on whether or not we refuse that application and logically submit some form of enforcement notice that requires demolition. And that's a radical action.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you, guys.
Councillor Bailey.
I don't want to prolong this, Chair, but surely, the fact that it needs a fresh planning application must mean that the planning merits must be subjectively reassessed. Otherwise, it wouldn't need a fresh application, would
it? Councillor Bailey is correct, Chairman, but the fallback position is clearly very, very material to the consideration that an inspector might have, and they will look very dispassionately at the differences and saying, local authority, why are you refusing this? That would be my judgment.
Okay. Anybody else? Because we're going to have to move this on, I feel. It has been moved for approval by Councillor Mackenzie, but it's not yet seconded.
I'll second it.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Windrus is seconding for approval. So I will put it to the vote. Councillor Andrews.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Bailey.
No, abstain, Chair.
Councillor Clearly.
For with great reluctance.
Thank you. I am unfortunately for with even greater reluctance, I think, than any other colleague on this committee, because it's a big disappointment. Councillor Hope. Councillor Hope, are you still with us? You're on mute.
No, it's not.
Oh,
It's not on mute.
Councillor Hope?
Shall we come back to him?
I'll come back to him. Councillor Mason?
Against.
Councillor Mackenzie?
For.
Councillor Potter?
Reluctantly, with tied hands and mindful of appeal, for.
Thank you. Councillor Thackeray?
Against.
And Councillor Windress?
For.
Councillor Hope, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry about that. 4.
4. Thank you, Councillor Hope. Right, you have to give me a minute here, guys, because this is complicated. We've got 1 abstention. 1, 2, 3 against.
6 for.
And 6 for. Do you
Yeah.
agree with that, Gary?
Yes. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is approved. Thank you, members. Can we move on to item 11? I think we're at item 11. Yes, we are. This is application number 20/00910/73A. This is removal of a planning condition which relates to a local needs occupancy condition, and it's the Sunday School Cottage, May Road, Weaverthorpe, Moulton. And I think, who's doing this one? Rachel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this application solely relates to the removal of local needs occupancy condition. We have been advised that the current occupants of the property are actually not employed at Velco. I just wanted to bring that to members' attention, but to advise that we do not actually know if the applicants remain locally employed. So we don't know if there has actually been a breach of a condition. And the tenancy is due to expire in January 2021. This information does not change the substance of the recommendation, nor the reason for refusal, which revolves around the pricing and marketing period of the property. If I can just take you through the photos. Ellie, could you please move to the first photo? So yes, the application property is the building in the centre of the shot with the 2 gabled roofs, and it has a narrow curtilage. If you move to the second photo, Ellie, please. Although the photo has actually been unfortunately shrunk, the curtilage only extends as far as the driveway, and then the other driveway is to the property, which is set to the back. If members could kindly consult page 145 of the agenda, they will find the site location plan that was submitted for the original application. That gives the context to the site in terms of what was originally there and then what was granted as part of the change of use and extension of that property. And there is the curtilage, a garden area which is actually detached off from the property. So I just wanted to bring that to members' attention, and thank you.
Ooh, that was brief. Thank you very much.
I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'll open it up for questions. Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, is the are there any building limits? Is there a development limit for Weaverthorpe, and is the property within that within the development limit?
Yes, Councillor Andrews, it is within development limits. That is one of the reasons why it has actually obtained planning permission. This application was approved a couple of years ago as part of a change of use of what was a Sunday school building, and it was turned then into a dwelling with extensions. So the principle of the use has been established. What the application seeks to do is to remove the local needs occupancy condition. Now that has got policy implications with regards to how we apply our development plan policies, and the report sets out the issues with how the property has been marketed and how it has been priced, and the duration of that marketing, and officers consider that it is not in effect acceptable to lift the condition at the present time.
Chair, just another question. Can it be confirmed, please, that this matter hasn't actually been before members before? Because I think the report refers to a decision under delegated powers. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. The report refers to another property in the village, Eastgate Cottage, that was considered under delegated powers regarding a Section 73 application to lift the local needs occupancy condition. And the report sets out the differences between the two applications in relation to the differences in terms of the nature of the property, the duration of the marketing, which was considerably longer, and also in relation to the price, reflecting the depreciation that results in the local needs occupancy condition. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bailey.
No questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
No questions, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Rachel, I've got a couple of questions, because there's a small area in red which is further over from the chapel. That's part of the chapel's. It's not a boundary because it's divorced from the chapel position, but it's normal because chapels generally don't have much land with them in any case.
That's absolutely correct. Yes, it is an unusual situation. You would normally expect a property to have its curtilage that was associated with it, and that was ancillary to its operation, to actually be physically contiguous with it. But in this case, the site was very narrow, and in terms of then extending the property as they needed to turn it into a viable building, it's meant that they did have access to an extra parcel of land that was in effect not absolutely adjoining, but is sort of reasonably proximal, and that became part of in effect the private domestic curtilage of that building. But it is an unusual situation. It is.
Okay, thanks for that. And then, sorry, another question. It says in the papers, Rachel, that they did reduce the selling price of the property down to the lower value, which is a lower value they got from Cundall's, and they did that in March 2019, but then rented it in August 2019. My experience is if you are trying to sell a property and you've got tenants in, it becomes more difficult to then sell the property when you've got tenants in resident. Is that true?
Well, I would say that it would be the case. I mean, as it was taken off the market at that point that the tenants moved in. And what it wasn't clear from the earlier submissions was whether or not the property was still in effect being advertised for letting and also advertised for sale. It was advertised for sale and for letting, and that resulted in the letting happening in August 2019. And that may well have sort of confused prospective buyers. Okay. We can't be sure. Right. All we know is that it was rented in 2019 in the August.
So effectively from March to August it was on the market, but it could have been in an either or situation.
Yes, and we don't know for sure. Sorry, please continue.
That's only a period of about 6 months. Is that correct?
At its maximum, we don't have dates. So if you can imagine that it was put on the, it was reduced in price at say the end of March, the 31st of March, and then the occupants took possession of the keys at the 1st of August. Then actually it hasn't been, it's been marketed for a minimum of 4 months basically. So, but we don't know the precise timing. So it could be as little as 4 months. It could be as much as 6 months.
Sorry, Rachel. What kind of period of time would we find as a council acceptable for a marketing of a property if somebody wanted to come back and get the local needs occupancy clause lifted? Is there some kind of rule of thumb, if you like? What would we be looking for as a council?
Well, I mean, as we've discussed tonight, each site's considered on its own merits. There used to be in the old PPG7 guidance around occupancy conditions. They're primarily related to agricultural occupancy, but there would be a general presumption of around a year. Now, in the planning practice guidance, that got taken out, and it's certainly not within the MPPF, and nor is it actually within the planning practice guidance now. We have had applications that cover a spectrum of timeframes. We've had applications where the properties have been on the market for 18 months, and the property at Eastgate Cottage was marketed for 10 months. So it's very much considering, in effect, the valuation that's been made, how consistent that's been, how long it's been marketed for, and the currency as well of the marketing situation. Most applications that we've considered, either as officers or you have considered as members, have been made while the application is the property is still on the market. This is an instance where the property isn't on the market and hasn't been since August 2019.
Okay, thanks for that, Rachel. Sorry, Eric.
Sorry, I got absorbed in that. So just well, what are we voting on now?
We're not voting. We're in questions, Eric.
That's all right. Right, I'll come back. Yeah. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason.
No question. I think you hit the nail on the head, Caroline, with your questions. No questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. In section 2.1, there's a paragraph just at the top of the page, 140, where it says the applicant has claimed verbally that the property has remained on the market, etc., etc. I presume there is no comprehensive evidence that this is the case.
That's correct. I decided to have a look on Rightmove for myself to see what was actually publicised and being marketed. No, there's no evidence of the property, nor was any documents provided in terms of the duration of when the property was marketed. So yes, the applicant maintained that it was still on the market, but then there's subsequent submissions all showed that in effect the property was taken off the market in August 2019 and has not been back on the market.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, it just crosses my mind that there should be evidence that could be provided that it stayed on the market, and that seems to me a key issue, that there is no evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Thackeray.
Yes, you've also slightly asked the question that I was going to ask, Chairman, in respect of item 6.24 of the report. It states the property should be in due course marketed accordingly for a period of circa 10 months at its last advertised sale price of $160,000 or less. Is it possible that we can have clarification and something written down that specifies the length of time that a property should be on the market? Because I have researched this subject in some depth and find that on occasions it's 18 months, on occasions it's 14 months, as one is coming before us tonight under delegated powers, and you have written here 10 months. Now, it seriously infers in the report that you mean 10 months. When you write 10 months, you don't mean 1 year and 10 months. You mean 10 months is acceptable. It's basically saying to the applicant, if you come back, having had the property on the market for a period of 10 months, then we will consider it. I mean, those are the words. Could we have clarification on just what is acceptable, given that it isn't written in any, as you've said, not in any of the policy documents or guidance documents and PPF?
If I can, well, firstly, the development plan does not specify a given time period, and the nature of the applications that we've considered this under, they're primarily a function of when the applicant has decided that they wish to make an application to lift the condition. So that's why we've had applications over a range of timeframes. And we have considered those in relation to the duration of marketing, but also the price of the property and any interest that has been generated as a result of the marketing of the property. So these are the sort of key factors that we would take into account. Also, in relation to the 10 months, officers are mindful of the fact that whilst each site is an application is considered on its own merit, we have granted in the village the lifting of a local needs occupancy condition that was advertised at a very reasonable price that reflected the depreciation that comes from the local needs occupancy condition, and that property was marketed for 10 months. So that was the basis and the rationale for the report, identifying that we would consider an application favourably if after a 10-month period the price of the property had been such that it had reflected the local needs occupancy condition. If it was still without a sale, then the recommendation would be different.
Thanks, Rachel. Gary, you had your hand up and then it disappeared and went down
I've still
again.
got my hand up.
Yeah, just bear with me a moment, Simon, while I do Gary. Bear with me.
Well, I put my hand up just really to, well, I would have said what Rachel's just said, really. I mean, in the sense that the circa is around, that's what circa means, around 10 months. So what we often find is that applicants are submitting applications in the knowledge that the properties are still on the market, but it's going to take us 6 to 8 weeks to deal with the application through the consultation process. So you've got 2 months there. So there's no precise line on this. The precision that used to go around advertising properties with conditions, and as Rachel's already said, historically that's probably been more around agricultural occupancy conditions than these type of conditions, but same principle. Used to be around about a year, but that dropped out of national guidance. So that's why it's not actually specified in the plan, because when we went through the plan strategy, they had to be assessed in the light of compliance with national policy. So that's why the prescriptive period is gone. So again, you're back into this judgment period. And as Rachel's just explained, the approach that we took elsewhere in the village of a similar property, not a similar property, but probably property with a local needs occupancy condition on it that was advertised at a price that was reasonable in a concerted way, and yet nothing came forward in 10 months, and we took a view that that was a sufficient testing.
Okay, right, Gary. Simon.
Yes, this is again. It's a sort of a question, but it's posing a question that the issue of why an owner of a property might have it on the market and rent it out at the same time. I speak from personal experience within the last year of having done exactly that. And the reason why I've rented out my property is because whilst having it on the market, and certainly during having it on the market during a COVID pandemic, Ryedale District Council is happy to take council tax from a private landlord for an empty property.
Councillor Thackeray, that's an uncalled for comment, not helpful in the
No, it's an accurate comment. There's nothing uncalled for it at all. I'm just explaining the reason why a landlord would have the property on the market and be offering it for rent at the same time. Nothing uncalled for whatsoever.
But I'm not suggesting that that's uncalled for. It's just irrelevant to the consideration of the planning merits of this application.
Yeah. All right. The wrong word you.
With respect, to the planning. But with respect, that was actually referred to by the officer, not me.
Right. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? Councillor Windrus.
No questions, Chair.
Right. Thank you for that. We'll move into debate because I have no local member, so I'm just going to open it up and go down the list. Councillor Andrews.
Well, Chair, I find this a very difficult one, a very difficult case. Here we have a small property surrounded on all sides by properties which are not, which don't have a local occupancy condition attached to it. It's within the development's limits. The policy in regard to local occupancy conditions is actually under review at this very moment. Can you hear me? Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
At the last meeting, we granted planning consent for a house in a very prominent position, which is going to be hugely valuable, and we attached no local occupancy condition to it simply because it happened to be covered by a different branch of the policy, and that not the local plan policy, but the government policy, which I always understood the local plan policy was intended to supersede. I pay particular attention to the points made by the parish council. So they say the policy against local occupancy is designed to stop second homes, properties being bought by second homes by people who come from way outside the district. And I think that's also my understanding. But on the other hand, it's such a small property that it's unlikely to face that situation. And there is a need for younger people from further afield to come into the village, and a property of that price could probably be affordable for a lot of people who can't buy properties in other parts, other properties in other parts of the district, which are larger. And in those circumstances, Chair, I feel that I want to grant permission. So I will propose that permission is granted.
Thank you. Gary, you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in?
Can we go through the debate and then have the...
Councillor Andrews, will you stop interrupting? I was answering the question. I'd inadvertently pressed the button. I wasn't trying to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to say a bit about this, and I do actually quite fundamentally disagree with Councillor Andrews, because the council has set out to make a very small proportion of local occupancy housing in the villages and rural areas. And the purpose, it's done that, it's gone through its planning processes, it's all been above board, it's what the policy says, it's what people should expect to happen. And it means that a very small, maybe one or two houses in each village are covered by this occupancy condition. And the purpose of that is still relevant. It is to make sure that there's something which is at a slightly discounted price, maybe a little bit of favour given to people who have a need to live or work close by. And so the policy is intact. It's what we as a council set out to do, and it's doing that job. It's not something I always loved. I've dealt with this policy with the National Park for years and years. But it does take a bit of maintenance. But that's what it's there to do. And we shouldn't just undo it piecemeal, because that's unfair to all the people who are doing the right thing, as somebody said earlier. So by all means, review the policy and change it if you want. But at the moment, we have a duty to support the policies of our council and the officers that are delivering them. And so I think that there is also a way forward in this. And this council shouldn't remove these policies. Our purpose is to maintain them in perpetuity. That's what it says. But we have to be reasonable. We can't be unreasonable in dictating that they must stay regardless. And that's why we have this process of testing whether or not there's a reasonable need for maintaining the condition. And we have a process that's set out for that. And so if the applicant were to come to the council and say, OK, I want to get rid of this condition, we would agree a marketing plan, we would agree a time, we would liaise with the estate agents and a valuer maybe. But this council shouldn't be trying to lift these. It's not just putting an extra hurdle in the way for developers to try and get round. We put them on in perpetuity, and that should be our objective. If we don't want to put them on, let's take them off, not piecemeal. So I strongly support maintaining this, just in support, if you like, and recognition of all the other people who are doing the right thing.
Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I wholly endorse what Councillor Bailey's just said. I don't like local occupancy clauses, but that's not what we're debating here. We're debating the whether we support the application of this policy to this application. In a previous existence, I've both come up against planning authorities as an agent, as a developer, and when people say when you're advised in setting an application out, yes, you will need a marketing exercise at a price and for a time. You might not like it. I didn't, but you grit your teeth and do it, and at the end of the day, you prove the planning officer wrong. You get your application in the right time. No, seriously, I support this, and although Councillor Bailey was very strongly supportive, I don't think he actually recommended or moved approval of the recommendation, i.e. to refuse the application. So I will move refusal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Chairman. And also everything that Councillor Cleary said, and okay. I'll second that proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hope. Councillor Mason.
Yeah, I think Jim's suggestion actually about a marketing plan everywhere else is a good idea for this, and maybe that's a suggestion we'll bring forward when we decide the fate of the local occupancy rule. I think I'd probably support the officer on this one, to be honest. I find it interesting, though, that all the main points that have already been taken by the three people at the beginning of the debate every single time get snapped up by those councillors first, but leaving the rest of the end of the queue with nothing to say.
Sorry, Councillor Mason. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got to endorse what Councillor Bailey said. Again, he took the words out of my mouth, and I will be supporting the officer's suggestion that we refuse this. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
You'd be surprised if I had nothing to say, wouldn't you? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Rachel for what I thought was a particularly comprehensive and well-researched and well-written report. And I'd like to pose a somewhat rhetorical question, even though we're not in questions. Did the applicant not conduct any market research prior to committing to this building project with reference to demand and affordability? Because if not, why on earth are you trying to get rid of the local needs occupancy clause now? And although this local needs clause, it might not be perfect, but it's there for a purpose. And I very much agree with Councillor Bailey on this one. And it is the existing policy of this council. And on that basis, as it appears that this property hasn't been particularly well marketed or at a realistic price, and I'm quite sure it would be saleable if it was put on the market at a reasonable price. So, yes, I shall be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Thackeray.
Yes, now I need to just ask Gary if he's happy for me to ask a question about the items listed under delegated powers at this point in time, or do I need to wait?
We need to finish this item, I believe. Is this the delegated list at the back of the report, Simon?
Yes, it is, yes, because there is an item on there for the approval of lifting a local needs occupancy condition.
Right. Well, I think
it's customary. It's customary, Chairman, that if members do have any questions about the delegated list, they ask them when we get to that item, Chairman, or prior or after the meeting, rather than during it.
Yeah, we need to finish this item, please. Simon.
Okay. Therefore, if I can just say what I'd like to say, please. I've read the report very carefully, and I think I've asked Rachel for which she gave me the answer, clarifying the length of time that a property needs to be marketed for, and to a degree. Although I think again the council could probably specify the actual discounted amount that they consider. I mean, it is actually written in various reports here and there and everywhere. But I do draw members' attention to the parish council letter of Weaverthorpe, which I think is very, very comprehensive and illustrates why occupancy conditions can be problematical. I highlighted one of the sentences that was also picked up by the officer. It says, this property, even having the local needs occupancy condition applied to it, is currently occupied by a family from Poland, which I find the most incredible thing to see written down, but warms my heart because my daughter-in-law is Polish, my granddaughter's Polish, and Poland is somewhere that I have a tremendous amount of affinity for. And to see it in a Ryedale District Council planning application and written in an officer's report is something very, very extraordinary. But anyway, I would like to take the opportunity to second Councillor Andrews' proposal to refuse this application. Or that is correct, isn't it? It's an inverted answer, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's voting on the negative, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, well, there you are. I'd like to second Councillor Andrews. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Windress.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will be supporting it.
Oh, thank you. Right. From the chair, I have to say, I've looked at this report, and members will know I'm not a huge fan of the local needs occupancy clause. However, it does serve a purpose. And I look at the history of this application, and it was that the change of use and alteration extension was only in 2017. So this property is barely 3 years old. And already we've got an application to change it. It was put up for sale 18 months after the original application was approved at a higher value. And then between March and August, it was reduced to a lower value, a mere 6 months, but it was for rent or buy. So how did people really know what was going on there? And frankly, I'm like Councillor Cleary. You may not like it, but you have to have a concerted marketing campaign at the right price to see if the property sells. If it doesn't, then bring it back and we'll consider it again. But on this occasion, I can't support the lifting of this clause, which is entirely in line with the policy and was entirely in line with the policy at the time the application was made to build and alter the property in the first place. So it's not something new, it was there. So if you're building a property, it was already there. People knew that was what was there. So I am going to, with the rest of most of my colleagues, support the officer recommendation. Now, let me be clear, it was moved and seconded for approval for refusal first, and it was moved and seconded for refusal after that, because it was already moved and seconded for the officer recommendation before Councillor Thackeray seconded Councillor Andrews. So the motion that we're going to put is we are moving this for the officer recommendation for refusal. Okay, so Councillor Andrews.
Well, I vote against that. I vote for approval, Chair.
Yep, but it wasn't seconded till after we'd had a vote for first approval and seconding for refusal.
That's fine, Chair. So long as my vote for approval of the application is recorded as such. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Bailey.
I support refusal, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Cleary.
I support refusal.
Councillor, oh, that's me. I'm for refusal. Councillor Hope.
Refusal, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Refusal, and just that I find it interesting that we're quite strong on this clause. We're not on builders making big mistakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Councillor Mackenzie.
I support refusal.
Councillor Potter.
For refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Thackeray.
Totally against refusal.
And Councillor Windrus.
For refusal, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, so the application is supported for the officers, so it is refused, 8 votes to 2. Or it's. Thank you very much. Right, that item 12 has been withdrawn. So we're not doing that. And then we have a list of delegated decisions. And Councillor Thackeray, you indicated you wanted to ask about one of those.
Yes, if I may, please. I'm curious to know why this is item 24, Elm Tree Cottage, Main Street, Flaxton. I'm just interested to know from the officer why this has been a delegated approval, given that its sister property last year went to a planning committee meeting. I think that was my very first actual committee meeting, and engendered great debate. And Councillor Cleary's famous lines about properties being available in the housing stock. And I just don't understand why, when this is, I don't know whether I can describe it as against policy or not. I think it is policy. Obviously, there is a policy to lift the condition. But why the big expensive the elms at Flaxton last year, and now we have, well, to me, quite an expensive property here, the Elm Tree Cottage. Why it hasn't been brought to the committee? If there might be a simple answer to
that. Gary.
Yeah, there is a very simple answer, Chairman, really, in the sense that this application, this most recent application, was very much considered and dealt with in the knowledge of what had gone before in the same village with a very similar property. My understanding, and I'd have to refresh my memory with the report, was that the advertising and price asked was pretty much on par with what had previously been dealt with on the other application in the same village, and was dealt with, I don't believe, and I'm pretty certain, because otherwise it wouldn't have been under delegated powers, there were any differences of opinion. And that's really the essence of the way our scheme of delegation works ultimately at the end of the day is, in Weaverthorpe, we had a considered view of the parish council supporting the lifting of that local needs occupancy condition. I see Rachel's got her hand up.
Yeah, Rachel.
I think Rachel actually dealt with that application as well.
Rachel.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Gary. Yes, that was the reason why, under the scheme of delegation, the Elm Tree Cottage application was not before members. It was because there was no sort of variance of opinion. Elm Tree Cottage, yes, is a sizable property, but it was marketed for a period of over 15 months. at a price that did reflect the local needs occupancy condition. And because of that and the interest that it had generated, which also suggests that it had been very favourably priced, interested parties did not comply with its occupancy condition. What I said in my report to you tonight reflects in the sense that the higher value properties generally do struggle with the local needs occupancy condition because the local sort of catchment area, in terms of the price bracket, it can often price a lot of local people out of being able to access those properties. Anecdotally, though, the converse is the case for smaller properties, whereby their price is such that with the depreciation in the value, it makes them more attractive and more accessible to the local market, and they're able to utilise the fact that they have the local connection as well. So, as I was saying, it makes it more competitive for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Right, members, thank you very much. Simon, you still have your hand up. I don't want to prolong the debate. If it's worth perhaps chatting with the officers outside of the committee meeting, if you've any further questions.
Yes, but you're right. It'll be after the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Simon.
Another time and place. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Members, that's the conclusion of the meeting, I believe. Thank you very much.
Madam
Chairman.
Yes.
We have a site inspection, don't we?
You're right, absolutely, yeah.
I'm not sure, Chairman. Clearly, we have the potentially the other two. I think both on the 8th of December, and I'm looking to see whether Alan's still here. I think he is. As to what the likely progression with this application will be, because we are still, I think, waiting more information. In any event.
Hi, Gary. Yes, further information is required, and the applicant is currently compiling that, and then there'll be a reconsultation exercise. But at the same time, we've agreed an extension of time to take account of the 15th of December planning committee meeting. I think the applicant is keen, and I think it relates to grant funding, I think, for a decision sooner rather than later. But yes, we do need further information prior to a decision.
I suppose where that is wondering if Alan's thinking a report might be coming to the 15th of December, that we would need to try and arrange a site visit or a virtual visit prior to that.
Yeah.
And we've already got two on the 8th.
Yes, exactly. We did have the 4th of October penciled in. Is that any use for this one?
October, did you say?
Sorry, 4th of December. Sorry, 4th of December was penciled in originally, and we changed it to the 8th.
That's a Friday, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it's a Friday. I'm looking across again at Alan as to whether the 4th is doable from his perspective.
I think that is post-lockdown as well, isn't it?
Yes.
It is post-lockdown.
Yeah, I believe so. Although I've got in the diary the 4th is when site visits will take place, and then there's a meeting of committee on the 8th.
It's the meeting of the committee on the 8th, not the site. The site visits are on the 4th.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Sorry. I'm getting my dates mixed up now.
Yeah.
We clarify this.
Confusing me. Sorry. Well, we could. I suppose we could do it on Monday the 7th or Tuesday the 8th.
As long as we get some clarity.
Well, we have meetings that night, don't we?
We do. Is that not feasible? We've got this. We could do 7th, 9th, 10th.
I'm in your hands, Chairman. I mean, I think officers dealing with the applications on the 8th, that will be yourself for one of those, won't it, Alan?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Shall we go for the 9th?
I can do the 9th, but not the 7th or 8th.
Right. Well, shall we go for shall we try the morning of the 9th then?
Yeah.
Is that okay with you, Alan?
Yes, that's fine, yeah.
Right.
I've lost track of what we're doing now.
We're arranging the site visit for the Sproxton application, Steve.
Yes, I know that. I'm just lost track of where the other ones are now.
On the Friday, sorry.
On the 4th.
It's on Friday the 4th. We're going to Norton, to the site in Norton, and then we're going on to, Langton Road, and then we're going on to the site for the Environment Agency in Lillings Amber. That's on the 4th.
Friday.
And then we've just organised a site visit on the 9th of December for the Sproxton application.
Okay, and we've got a meeting on the 8th. Right.
Yes.
Chairman.
What time on the 9th, Chair? 10 o'clock?
Sounds reasonable.
Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Okay, 10 o'clock on the 9th. Thank you, Councillor Andrews, for that. 10 o'clock on the 9th.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to officers for
Caroline,
reports this evening.
Caroline, before I go, it's not for the meeting, just a message to Paul Taylor, if he's online.
I don't know whether Paul's online. Let me have a look.
Paul, I've just tried to download the previous planning agenda just to check something on the delegated decisions, particularly around the third energy gas peaker. And my iPad is telling me that the ryedale.gov.uk website is not a trusted site because it's lost its certificates. So I think they expired today by the looks of it.
Today, because I couldn't re-download the late papers.
Yes. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, Paul, that we can't get anything via our iPads at the moment downloading.
So,
thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Gary.
Yeah, sorry, we were aware of an issue earlier on, but we didn't know what it was. So something's obviously not quite right.
Yeah,
so we'll be chasing that up.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance this evening. Much appreciated.